Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the September Coronation interactive session. The theme for today's discussion is AfCFTA, the road ahead. Our first speaker for today is none other than Chinwe Egwim, Chief Economist, Coronation Merchant Bank. She will be presenting a macroeconomic session on trade and discussing digital as a key driver for trade. Our next presenter is Francis Anatogu, Secretary of the Nigeria's National Action Committee on AfCFTA and Senior Special Assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on public sector matters. He will be leading the session on leveraging the opportunities in AfCFTA, plotting a course for Africa's economic recovery trade. Our final speaker is Komiso Wu, Economic Affairs Officer, African Trade Policy Center, Regional Integration and Trade Division, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He will share his expert views on building a trade system that is driven by Africans and delivered to the world. There will also be a panel discussion with these leading professionals. Joining in the panel discussion is Demola Adekoya, Head Corporate Banking, Coronation Merchant Bank. Along with Demola is Kesiana Isiovu, Head Global Trade, Coronation Merchant Bank. Our moderator and host for today's session is an award-winning journalist, conversation strategist, and curator. Please join me as we welcome our host and moderator of the day, Mr. Wole Famurewa.
Good afternoon and welcome to this interactive session hosted by Coronation Merchant Bank. My name is Wole Famurewa and I'm delighted to be moderating today's session. On 1st of January, the African Common Free Trade Area Agreement came into force as the largest single trading market in the world in terms of the number of participating countries since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1994. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa estimates that the agreement will boost intra-Africa trade by as much as 52% by as early as next year. Now, doubts remain about how prepared Nigeria is to compete with more industrialized, export-oriented economies on the continent and benefit from the 1.3 billion people market that the African Common Free Trade Area has created. So today we'd like to unpack a few themes as we explore the broader theme of the Africa Common Free Trade Agreement, the road ahead. We'll be looking at the pandemic and its implications with respect to how it has disrupted work tools and business operations. Technology remains a key disruptor for global trade, and we look forward to looking at how digital business is a key driver for trade on the continent. We'll also be looking at how to unpack the opportunities that the AfCFTA offers to Nigerian entrepreneurs. So we'll be looking forward to that and also looking at how trade systems that are required for this to work can be built by Africans and delivered to the rest of the world. So you're all welcome again. Before we launch into the conversation this afternoon, allow me to address a few housekeeping issues. First, this is an interactive session and we value your contributions. So please type in your questions and comments in the chat field, and we'll look forward to addressing them during the Q&A session that follows the presentations and panel discussions. We'd also like you to participate in a short survey. A link to this can also be found in the Q&A field a little later in the program. And to incentivize you to do this, all those who fill out the survey will receive a link to a recording of the entire event. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to a great event.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our continuing series of conversations on the September 2021 edition of our continuing series of interactive sessions. The Coronation interactive sessions have been focused on stimulating discourse on pertinent economic challenges, and more importantly, on the critical solutions. The key intention of this platform is to develop transformational solutions to our critical challenges in Nigeria and beyond. As I stated during the maiden edition in July 2021, we intend to continue facilitating productive engagements like this with this key objective in mind. We have chosen to focus today's conversation, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the road ahead, around the opportunities we see in the trade finance space as we begin to prepare for the post-COVID business environment. Since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the international trade finance landscape has undergone rapid changes, from supply chain disruptions to higher logistics costs, to the adoption of digital technologies, to credit restrictions across the globe. The landscape has continued to evolve. More than ever before, organizations have been faced with multiple challenges while they strive to meet their strategic objectives. Perhaps now, more than ever, the expansion of intra-African trade is a critical enabler for the Nigerian economy. With the African Continental Free Trade Area now in force, the opportunities for companies and organizations to grow their business in a market of over 1.3 billion people, a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion can no longer be ignored. As Africa continues its journey on economic recovery post-COVID, it must look inwards and strive to leverage the resources and synergies available in building on trade finance and expanding intra-African trade, not just for the benefit of Africans, but of the rest of the world. We expect that today's discourse will provide information on how organizations can unlock the benefits inherent in the AfCFTA, drive the adoption of new technologies in the trade finance space, and reposition intra-African trade. Kindly permit to close my remarks by thanking our guest speakers, Mr. Francis Anatogu, the Executive Secretary of the National Action Committee on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and Mr. Komit Swosu, an economist with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adegbombe. We'll now move on to Chinwe. The floor is yours now to make your presentation.
Delivering the first session for this event is none other than Chinwe Egwim, Chief Economist, Coronation Merchant Bank. Chinwe is a wealth-experienced economic analyst with over 500 published economic notes under her belt geared towards macro development and financial economics. As Africa continues its path to economic recovery in a post-pandemic world, factors such as the macroeconomic environment and the pace of digital adoption remains key drivers for global trade. To give us insight on the macroeconomic environment and the digital drivers for the trade sector, please welcome Chinwe Egwin.
So good afternoon. I will give a brief presentation on a macroeconomic overview with trade in focus and of course digital as a key driver for trade. So let's begin. So the macroeconomic perspective, trade on a macro level, but with Africa as my vantage point. Trade is an important driver for Africa's economic growth and development. Last year, 2020, merchandise trade in Africa recorded exports and imports amounting to as high as $375 billion and $510 billion respectively. 2020 saw an average decline of 16% compared with 2019. This decline can be largely attributed, of course, to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we must note that before the pandemic struck, the region's trade growth has steadily underperformed when compared with other regions across the globe. Now, over half of Africa's exports are fuel and mining products. About a quarter of them are manufactured goods, and 15% are agricultural products. 40% of intra-African exports consist of manufactured goods, a large part of which are iron and steel, chemicals, and other semi-manufactured goods. Algeria, Angola, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, Nigeria, and then South Africa are among the region's leading players. Collectively, these countries I've just mentioned accounted for about 60% of Africa's total trade in 2020. In general, all of Africa's commercial services exports have increased by more than 30%, from $57.7 billion recorded in 2005 to over from $57 billion recorded in 2005 to over $70 billion in 2020. Now, according to the latest report on trade finance released by the Afrexim Bank, Africa's trade finance gap in 2019, I guess that's the latest data available. So 2019 was estimated at $81 billion, and this represents 5.5% of the trade finance gap globally. So on to the next slide. Now, diving into trade, but from Nigeria's vantage point, Nigeria's major trading partners include China, India, Spain, the United States, Netherlands, Canada, and Russia. The United Kingdom also features on that list. Exports from Nigeria are primarily crude petroleum and other raw materials such as cocoa, rubber, palm kernels, organic oils, and fats. However, imports include products such as chemicals, machinery, transport equipment, manufactured goods, food, and refined petroleum products. Now, last year, Nigeria recorded a 10.3% decline in total foreign trade. The value of total imports in 2020 stood at $48 billion, which was 17.3% higher than what was recorded in the previous year. However, total exports declined by as high as 35% from what was recorded in 2019. And of course, this was primarily due to international restrictions, which were triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, all of this suppressed trade activities. At the end of the year, the current account deficit widened to 4% of total GDP, from 3.6% of GDP that was recorded in 2019. And of course, this was mainly due to the significant decline in export activities on the back of the ongoing pandemic. Thankfully, the first quarter trade data for this year show some brighter spots, as international trade has picked up considerably. So total foreign trade rose by 14% year on year, and that's compared with 2020, of course. The trade report for the second quarter of this year was also better, as total foreign trade rose to $29 billion, representing an 89% increase. While imports in this quarter were valued at $16.7 billion, representing 59% of total trade, total exports represented 42% of total merchandise trade. And of course, this can be partly attributed to the release of pent-up demand, particularly within the middle income bracket, as well as the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines, giving economies confidence to trade. So you'd find that imports outweighed exports. In Q2 this year, import value from ECOWAS countries into Nigeria was at $109 million. This is less than 1% of total import activity coming in from other African countries. Analysis of imports by country of origin showed that the majority of goods imported during the period originated from China, with a value of as high as $9.9 billion. This was followed by Netherlands and then India, United States, among others. During the same period, goods worth $1.6 million, or 8.1% of total exports, was exported to countries within ECOWAS. So the next slide. Next slide really talks about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So we're getting into the meat of the discussion. The main objective of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is to stimulate intracontinental trade and ultimately stimulate economic growth and improve incomes. The expectation really is that the adoption of this agreement will increase intra-African trade by at least 25% in the medium to long term. The agreement aims to create a single market for goods and services. This will contribute to the development of continental supply chains, upgrading production towards more complex and higher value goods and services, and of course reducing the cost of trade and improving competition and productivity. The agreement is expected to foster competitive manufacturing among the member nations, as intra-regional trade flows are significant for African industries that want to produce more complex products and move up the value chain of production. The AfCFTA has the dispute settlement mechanism for trade disputes, which offers mediated consultations between disputing parties. The mechanism would foster cooperation among member states on investments and competition policies, intellectual property rights, and other trade liberating strategies. AfCFTA emphasizes the elimination of 90% of tariffs on intra-regional trade and addresses non-tariff barriers. These are necessary elements required to support the doubling of intra-regional trade. The agreement is also expected to reduce the continent's reliance on external resources, as well as encourage independent financing and development. Now, with Nigeria in focus, Nigeria stands to benefit quite a lot from this agreement, and I'll just try to list a few ways in which Nigeria can benefit. So one would be increasing the export of commodities, particularly agricultural and non-oil commodities, manufactured products as well as services, a provision of a larger market access, free movement of labor, goods, services, and capital, motivating SMEs to expand their businesses to other African countries, fostering business growth and increased profit, as well as contributing substantially to the development of the manufacturing sector, which, by the way, accounts for less than 15% of total GDP as I speak. Increasing job opportunities and the demand for labor, as manufacturers are likely to set up their plants and hubs in Nigeria to take advantage of this larger market access. And as such, that should have an indirect impact.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, sincere apologies for the break. It's the gremlins have caught up with us, but we should fix it very shortly. It does seem like it's a connection issue, and I'm sure it will be resolved shortly. So Chinwe would continue her presentation, but I think she's already hitting a few very important notes that we hopefully will unpack as we transit to the panel conversation. I think one that I certainly look forward to interrogating is the whole concept of continental supply chains being built as there is in Nigeria as we transit into the African Free Trade Area. And then, of course, we'll transit to the next presentation. Obviously, we're going to unpack quite a few important themes over the course of the next hour or so. Leveraging opportunities in the African Common Free Trade Area will be the next presentation. And I hope that you will have your questions for us as we transit to the Q&A segment of this program.
With the Africa Free Trade Area now in force, the opportunities for organizations to grow their business across Africa is limitless. To provide insight on how businesses can leverage opportunities in the AfCFTA, please give a warm welcome to Francis Anatogu, the Secretary of Nigeria's National Action Committee on the African Continental Free Trade Area and Senior Special Assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on public sector matters.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today to present, to discuss the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. I hope you can see my screen. Can someone confirm?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I will very quickly, Chinwe has actually started talking about what AfCFTA is about. So I'll build on what she had said, and essentially she's talked about what the objectives are. Essentially, grow our intra-Africa trade among ourselves. But the other point to note about that is that AfCFTA is a set of rules to help us do that. She talked about dispute settlement mechanism, among others. So something to note about the AfCFTA has been negotiated in phases. We don't have agreement that covers trade in goods, trade in services, the dispute settlement mechanism that she talked about, and there's also a protocol for free movement of persons. But now we just kicked off the phase 2, which involves investment policy, competition, intellectual property rights, and digital economy. And you will agree with me that these are key enablers for the phase 1 protocols. The benefits she talked about, and that actually to bring it into focus in terms of what does this mean for us as businesses or traders. So it's about eliminating tariff on 90% of tradable items. There's also, for the remaining 10%, 7% which will cover strategic products or sectors or infant industries will be liberalized over a longer period, and exclusive lists are those, the 3% of tradable items that a country, a signatory country, will say, I will not liberalize. The other thing that it offers is product-specific rules of origin. What does this mean? It means the minimum level of African content that you must have in your product for it to enjoy the duty-free status. And this is very important because what it means now is that whereas you can go to China, Brazil, or US to buy your raw materials or something, and then come and add value and sell, if you source some of those materials within Africa, then the likelihood of meeting the threshold local content will be much higher. So it incentivizes us to seek out producers in Africa for our raw materials, our components, and so on. The third thing that it provides, I talk about set of rules, it's about African countries harmonizing policies, regulations, and standards. Regulations affect trade in services a lot. So by working towards a uniform set of regulations and standards, it reduces the burden of compliance. And of course, mutual recognition arrangements, which an example of which is double tax treaty. So double taxation treaty, if you have it, that means the tax burden is reduced, and that translates to cost reduction. If you think about licenses, if you think about certificates, especially for people moving to other countries, or even the national treatment article, which means that when we are moving to another African country, our businesses should be treated as if they are from those countries. And of course, the customs cooperation and mutual administrative assistance around bringing the customs of entities together, so some kind of almost real-time, they are in touch with one another and then can resolve issues when they arise and reduce the dwell time at the ports. And of course, the objective is grow Africa trade. Why should we bother for us in Nigeria? In the past 5 years, we've witnessed 2 recessions for whatever reason, but we witnessed it, so we need to do something to improve resilience in our economy. Over the past 5 years as well, we've witnessed devaluation of our currency. And for businesses, this actually means that in dollar terms, your income or your worth has actually gone down greatly, which impacts your ability to even scale. So you need to hedge against that. Now, our population has been growing steadily, but our exports haven't been. So per capita, we are regressing. So we need to grow our GDP, we need to grow our export. Climate change considerations and all of that, we need to focus on non-oil growth. If you bring it closer as well and making every state viable, that means that we now need to, this opportunity is to make every state in Nigeria provide opportunity for them to grow their local economy, export as much as they can, and then protect their revenues as well. But the other thing to bear in mind is that Africa, like Chinwe was pointing out, Africa is a big market compared to Nigeria as the biggest economy in Africa. We import about $600 billion of products every year. We have a population of 1.2 billion, among other things. And if you think about it, and if you look at the right, you will see the kind of staggering figures that you see in terms of refined petroleum. Africa imports 38 billion. This is based on 2017 figure. But that is big. And I'll show you a bit more of what Africa imports. We know there are all sorts of challenges from productivity, insecurity, and all of that. But these are challenges that are already here with us. These are challenges we must navigate through to be successful, and we really don't have any choice, because we are already seeing the impact of do nothing scenario. Now, how then do I start taking advantage of this? By the way, yes, trade has started officially on 1st of January, but there are some administrative requirements for trade to actually start in practice. These are the schedule that shows what will be liberalized by countries and what will not be, because that's what will help you to know where the opportunities are. The second thing is the rule of origin that I talked about. We have negotiated rules of origin on about 95% of tradable items, but we need to complete it so that people know the rules of origin that will apply to their products. But coming to services, which accounts for about 50% of Nigeria's GDP, AfCFTA phase 1 will be liberalizing services, the following 5 sectors: financial services, communication services, transportation, tourism, and business services. What does this mean? These are the services that we remove the barriers for people to come in and people to trade with one another. And when you're thinking services, there are 4 modes of supply of services. Services is a bit more tricky than trading goods. One is cross-border supply, which is where you are offering services from one country to another. So perhaps if your businesses are taking services via telecommunications, banking services, architectural services, and what have you, but you are in one country and providing that service in another country. The second mode is consumption abroad, which is where a service customer goes into, for instance, when you travel to the recipient country and provide the service there, like tourism, for instance. The third one is where you have a commercial presence in that country. For instance, you have a subsidiary in another country. And then the fourth one is presence of natural persons, which is where natural persons go there to provide those services. And it's important to understand this because they guide the rules, they guide the requirements for how you can take advantage of the AfCFTA or provide services offshore in general. If you talk about trade in goods, I already talked about liberalization of 90% of tradable items, so that's something to bear in mind. I already talked about rules of origin. In rules of origin, there are 5 criteria, right? There are those products that will require that would have to obey wholly obtained criterion, which means that 100% made in Africa or made in a particular country. Then, if it's not wholly obtained, then they would have achieved significant transformation. And you gauge significant transformation based on HS codes, right? It would have some products will have they have to move from the HS code of their raw materials or the components to a different HS code for HS code heading for the final product. In some cases, it's just change in a subheading within the same heading. In other cases, is the value of the non-originating material, value of imported items that will determine what whether you meet the criteria. And the last one is some specific processes are defined that if you have to comply with for it to be described as AfCFTA product. Examples of wholly obtained material you can see on the screen: agricultural produce, natural resources, wastes, and so on. Example of a change in tariff heading is what you're seeing. For instance, wood is tariff heading 44, but by the time it moves into furniture, it is tariff heading 94. And a subheading classification is like diamond, gold are all tariff heading 71, but different subheadings. But when you combine them into a jewelry, it's still tariff heading 71, but it has moved into a different subheading. And manufacturing process is, again, like I said, different. There are some basic rules, but by the time you finish your process, you must have met certain criteria. So these are things to bear in mind when you say you're going to take advantage of the AfCFTA. And it is not just enough to for your production process or your service process to meet these. AfCFTA rules provide for a designated competent authority in the country, in every member state, that would check your compliance and then issue you a certificate of compliance, which will then be circulated with all the customs of all the state parties, so that when your product arrives there, they already know that it's been checked and it is compliant. But it does not take away, that is different from the rules of the certificate of origin that goes with every shipment. But this just to give you an example of how it will work in practice. And to understand, where your products and the rules of origin that will apply, if you go to our website on AfCFTA reference document, which is on www.ngrafcfta.gov.ng, you will be able to download. It's a Word document, you can download it. It will take a bit of time to understand, but you will be able to go down to your product code and then see what the rules that will apply. Beyond the rules of origin and all of that, there are other technical requirements. Requirements in terms, I've talked about harmonization of regulation standards. So standards, you must meet the standards of your country, your NAFDAC, your SON, your quarantine service, and all of that. But you also need to meet the requirements of the importing country as well. Now, by the time the AfCFTA kicks off and all these things are in place, the idea is that they will mirror one another so that when you make an effort to satisfy your NAFDAC, you would have satisfied the NAFDAC of the importing country. There are also rules around labeling and a lot of other things. And all these things for every exporter, you need to know this. Now, the question then is, which products can I take advantage of? And what we've done is we've looked at, are there products that we already exporting? So we can say it's a matter of scaling. And we use the threshold of where we already exporting $10 million per annum. And Africa imports about a minimum of $1 billion per annum. And when we did that, we came across a number of products that you're seeing on the screen. Some of them are agricultural products, some of them are manufacturing products, and so on. And you can see the values. It's staggering. If you look at mineral oils, like refined petroleum products and what have you, Africa imported $94 billion of that. In I think this was 2019 or so. Plastics, iron and steel, but also things like fertilizer, wood, fish, and all of that. So, and these are products we are already exporting in excess of $10 million per annum. So, in spite of all the issues, in spite of all the problems that we have, some people have figured out how to make this work. So, again, so it's not there's hope that we can do this. But what we also found is that there are some areas where Africa imports a lot, but we are not there at all. A key example is auto and auto parts, electrical machinery and equipment. And these are areas that we must actually build the comparative advantage in these areas. And if you drill down, for instance, you see that, for instance, electrical machinery and equipment, we already do electrical cables and so on. So there are products that we can push to Africa. If you come to services, again, freight, we focused on services that have been liberalized. Freight service, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of imports in freight, passenger services, but also in travel. Now, when you look at health and education services, for instance, we see how much we import. Look at insurance. Insurance, Africa imports almost $6 billion of insurance services per annum. So there are areas that we can take advantage of. Nobody says it will be easy, but the opportunity is there. When we started looking at the markets, what we found, first of all, we know this already, that we have a big market. So we can't ignore our market. We must protect our market share. But there are 54 countries that have signed up to this. How do we even prioritize? And what we found is that if we focus on 5 and ECOWAS, which is where we already are customs union, we will cover about 50%. And by the way, these countries already are customs union. So there are other countries that by getting into these countries, we will serve some of them. So looking at all of this, and this is my last slide, is to say, how do we then start to implement this? And first of all, at the National Action Committee, we first of all came up with this is draft and been reviewed and yet to be adopted. But we said that because we are talking non-oil and because the problem that we have is actually national, AfCFTA and export trade in general offers us the opportunity to make every state in Nigeria economically viable. And AfCFTA provides that platform. And really is about identifying, and we have identified some specific products that when you talk about them, Nigeria comes to mind. In fact, it goes beyond Nigeria to talk about the particular states where they originate. Talk about soya or ginger, talk about Kaduna, talk about Shia, talk about Niger State, talk about tech or fintech, you talk about Lagos, that kind of thing. And if we can capture 10% of Africa's market, we would actually be doubling our export, our total export revenue per annum. But we also have gone down and broken these down into 7 goals. And in summary, producing what we're going to export because we need to produce at scale. Growing highly productive workforce for 2 reasons. One, because we need highly productive workforce to be competitive, but also growing the workforce that will go beyond Nigerian borders from 200 million to 1.2 billion people. Business environment, right? Chinwe talked about digital automating administrative processes, automating production processes, automating information systems, and all of that. There's a lot that needs to be done in that area. The 4th one is we must catalyze our domestic environment. We must boost local demand. We must take deliberate action to do that. The 5th one is infrastructure, and a lot is happening in that area, but thinking about how do we build common systems. It's about building an ecosystem. It's about building trade corridors. The 6th one is access to market. So it's not enough. A key problem that we're having is visibility of our products. So even the good quality products that are made in Nigeria are not visible to a lot of people in Nigeria, not to talk about people in Africa. So we must take steps to make these products visible. We must take steps to take these products deliberately to African countries and then distribute them. So partnerships, establishing subsidiaries and all of that will come in here. And the last part is actually implementing the text of the agreement, establishing trade remedies authority, which would be like an early warning system when we encounter cases of dumping, unfair subsidies, and what have you. And a key one as well is about having some kind of a one-stop shop so that businesses know where to go and get a solution. So I will stop here at this point because I have just 10 minutes. But I'll be around to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francis. Very enlightening. And we certainly will be unpacking more of the information that you've shared today. We're already receiving questions, and I just want to draw the attention of all our attendees to that. Please use the Q&A field to type in your questions, and we'll be getting to all of them as we proceed. And as I mentioned earlier, the incentive for you to receive a link to the video of this event is for you to fill out a survey. Now you can find the survey link in the Q&A field right now, so please look in there, click on the survey link, fill it out, and you will be getting a link to the recording of this event once we're done. So thank you so much as you do that. So I'm sure you have some questions already. I can see them, and we'll be getting to them later on. But in the meantime, let's listen to our next presentation, and please stand by for a brief introduction.
Africa's potential as a growth market for local and foreign businesses is without doubt. The signing of the AfCFTA agreement signaled a beginning of a new era of African trade. What remains to be seen is how Africa can grow intra-African exports. To share insight on building a trade system driven by Africans and delivered to the world is Comiso Wu, Economic Affairs Officer, African Trade Policy Center, Regional Integration and Trade Division, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He is an economist, currently working on regional integration and industrialization issues at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Addis Ababa. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Comiso Wu.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this session. Very interesting discussions so far. So I'm quickly going to unpack some of the issues that were already presented by Chinwe and Francis around 3 specific and quick questions. So the first one will be, are there African market for made in African products and services? Very critical question as we are talking about the AfCFTA, which is creating an African market for made in African products and services. Second one, beyond Nigerian markets, is the AfCFTA really a game changer for the continents? Why and what are the key opportunities? And lastly, what does it take concretely for businesses and of course everyone to reap the benefit of the AfCFTA? So the first one, what I want to show here is the fact that despite the rhetoric about structural transformation of the continent, mainly most of the economies here again are dependent on the exports of primary commodities. Nigeria not being an exception. When we look at the share of export of merchandise vis-a-vis total exports, Nigeria continue to export more than 80% of merchandise under the form of commodity, mainly oil, cocoa, beans, and so. And I think Francis alluded to those issues. But this is also to tell you that most of the economies actually across the continent depend heavily on commodities. Few countries that are more or less more diversified include, for example, Egypt, South Africa, and Morocco, and those economies might be more ready to enjoy the AfCFTA benefits once the markets are open. Now, when it comes to specific products across the continent, what I'm presenting now in the graph on your right are some of the products we are currently imported within from the world market. So compared to what the share or what the scope of what we are importing from Africa. So total imports from the world markets are in red, and in blue, you will see what is currently imported from the continent. So almost everything, when moving from petroleum, oil, motor vehicle to cereals, to cotton fabric, milk, and so. Every single thing is being exported mainly from the rest of the world, which means there is a huge gap that products made in Africa can supply. Now, how do we do that? It's the hope that the AfCFTA, creating a kind of African market for African product, will contribute to increase the blue lines, at least to reduce the gap of our over-reliance to export to world market. And I think one thing that COVID has also shown us is that during crisis and health crisis, supply disruption makes very vulnerable countries that heavily depend on remote markets. The picture of Nigeria when it comes to both exports and import, you can clearly see here the map, what I put, the diagram here, are what Nigeria is currently exporting or importing to or from the world vis-a-vis the trade pattern with Africa and then ECOWAS. So the picture here also clearly shows that Nigeria depends heavily on the rest of the world's markets. So in Africa, more or less and more than half in many instances are dealt with within ECOWAS trading region. That means there are also more opportunities to trade within African market. Now, AfCFTA being a game changer, the scope has been well discussed by Francis as well as Shinwe I'm not going back to that. But in terms of status of ratification, to quickly tell you that as of today, there are about 42 African Union member states that have ratified the AfCFTA. Only one country, Eritrea, have not signed yet the agreement. There are few that have signed the agreement but have not ratified. But among those that ratified beyond Nigeria, you can see there are several, almost all biggest economies across the continent, which means the AfCFTA now is a true story. How do we make sure we all benefit from it as a private sector? How do we make sure the government create an enabling environment are some of the key issues to look at now moving forward. In terms of impacts, we have at the UN Economic Commission for Africa recently revised our estimates, and we do believe that by 2045, the trades in terms of intra-African trade can increase as much as 40% compared to 2020 with the AfCFTA in place vis-a-vis if the AfCFTA was not in place. Of course, without AfCFTA, the trade could increase as well, but the AfCFTA serve actually as a catalyst. And we have seen increases across all the subsector, but most of the gains actually will happen in the manufacturing sector as well as services also. Now, in terms of sectors with high potential, I think this is also something that has been also confirmed by some of the findings presented by Francis. Some of the products we have seen higher potential, of course, vehicle and transport equipment are one of the sector with highest potential for the continent. Agro-food products from sugar, milk, and so. Wood and paper product as well, because the continent currently depend a lot on those products from the rest of the world, textile, chemicals, as well as energy metals. In terms of services, let's not forget that the services are industries themselves, but are also very critical inputs to industry. Finance will be one of the key areas where AfCFTA will have to push up, and also finance is very important. It will be a catalyst for the AfCFTA. And there I see countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Mauritius, Morocco being kind of regional leaders in those specific sectors. ICT and digital service as well. Nigeria, Egypt, Rwanda, South Africa. Egypt now has developed a very well integrated technological park that will not only help Egypt to penetrate European Union market, but also AfCFTA market. Education and health, very important issue to look at increasingly, especially within the context of the COVID as well, infrastructure, logistics, and many others. So from the private sector perspective, or from the banking perspective, I think some of these areas should be the one where the financial institution or investment bank, like some of the banks providing trade finance in Africa, should really devise specific product to help African make the most of the AfCFTA. Very huge opportunity in medicinal and pharmaceutical as well. More than 85% of pharmaceutical products are currently imported from the rest of the world outside the continent, the EU, China, Switzerland, India, US, and UK being the main suppliers of medicinal and pharmaceuticals to the continent, despite the fact that there are some local industries, capacities in countries like South Africa, of course, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and Egypt. But then, how to make sure those economies will actually set up or expand businesses to enjoy those specific those specific industry in pharmaceutical and others. The AfCFTA again provide concrete support through rule of origin, extensively explained by Francis. But it's important to understand as well whether investment banks and others, what are the rules, how a country can qualify or how a product will qualify to AfCFTA benefits. In terms of mining sector, I think this is one area where people usually debate a lot if Africa can really add value to the mining sector. Usually, it's true that a lot are happening when it comes to agro-processing products, but in terms of mining, very few countries, maybe South Africa and some countries, few countries are adding value. But this picture you are seeing here is what I took from a metallurgical company that is currently operating in Gabon. They are actually processing manganese to some value-added product, which means, of course, it's possible to transform those mining product across the continent, and there are a lot of opportunities. But what I will also say that this takes a lot of investment because those sectors are very capital intensive, and usually a regional approach is very important to be able to add more value. And in that regard, last year, I think there was an agreement between Togo and Nigeria for Dangote, for example, to be able to source phosphate from Togo to, supply a fertilizer plant in Nigeria. So this is a good example of regional approach to add value to our commodities across the continent. In oil sectors, it will be important. I think base oil and lubricant for car as well will be one of the key sectors we will be looking at. We need to look at as investors as well. These products, lubricant and base oil, can be processed within the continent, considering the huge resources when it comes to crude oil and others. And if you look at even export and imports of oil today, we continue significantly to export crude oil and then import refined oil. So the AfCFTA, again, through rule of origin, will provide a market, African market, for those products. Now, what does it take quickly to reap the benefit of the AfCFTA? Rules of origins, I think Francis mentioned that. It's very important because the ideas is really to create African market for made in African product. No matter where the investment is coming from, the products need to be significantly transformed within the continent. For example, when I take a cocoa, which is grown in Nigeria, processed into chocolate in Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire, can be exported, for example, into Ethiopia under the AfCFTA benefits, lower tariffs on those value-added products. But again, if I just pick cocoa grown and processed into butter in Brazil, just package them in Nigeria and export them in Egypt, this will not be considered as significantly processed under the AfCFTA. And that's, I think, the point that was made clear by Francis is that we need to all understand those rules from the private sector, because the private sector is the one producing, from the bankers as well, because the bankers, if they want to develop or design product to support AfCFTA, and also from the government perspective, because policymakers, custom authority are going to check compliance to those rules of origins. Services as well, I will not come back to that because I think Francis explained in some details. It's important to understand all the modes of supply and how countries liberalize their services, so that as private sector, we don't come and complain that countries are not liberalizing well or have not liberalized. So we really need to understand which specific modalities each countries are taking to liberalize services. because of the time, what I want to now quickly share here is how do we make sure we reap the AfCFTA benefit, because it's not going to be automatic. Countries can set up, revise their tariff rules, reduce tariff barriers. If we are not able to produce costs efficiently, we will not be competitive vis-a-vis other markets. For example, nothing will prevent an investor from the US to come to invest in maybe, let's say, Burkina Faso or South Africa, produce under the AfCFTA, and then target Nigerian markets. So there will not be any limitations to investment flows. What the limitation or the rule will be applied to the trade flows themselves, the goods or the services that will be traded. So now, you know, a lot of countries from the discussion, there are a lot of extra AfCFTA also investors that are interested in the big AfCFTA market. That's why competitiveness of national regional economies will be very important, and Francis alluded to some of the actions that are being undertaken in Nigeria to make Nigerian economy more competitive within the AfCFTA context. So adoption of clear implementation strategies, very important, from government as well as for the private sectors. Understanding rules also and practices under the AfCFTA and how these interplay with existing trade agreement. For example, Nigeria is already part of ECOWAS, which is a custom union. So it's good to understand what are the convergent rules to be able to produce and tackle, address, or toward ECOWAS market, and at the same time, AfCFTA market. Market prospection, I think, is very important. There is a huge opportunity now to attend some of the trade fairs that's happening across the continent. There will probably be one in Durban, the Intra-African Trade Fair organized mainly by Afreximbank. There were in 2-3 years in Egypt. The first edition of that specific trade fair, I saw a lot of SMEs, company from Nigeria that were sponsored. Some of them were sponsored by the Bank of Industry, Nigeria, and some of the bank. Now it's also important for a bank as Coronation to also support some of those traders that have high potential to enjoy or to penetrate intra-African markets. So trade facilitation instrument will also be very critical to make the AfCFTA work. So these are some of the issues I wanted to put on the table. Again, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
As I mentioned, we would like to now transit to the Q&A segment. And in the interest of time, I would just like to ask that all our previous speakers should please turn on your videos so that all our attendees can see you. And then on top of that, I'd like to invite also to join this segment the head global trade at Coronation Merchant Bank, that's Kesiana Esievo. So Kesiana, please. And then I can see you already, Demola Adekoya, who is the head of corporate banking at Coronation Merchant Bank as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Francis, there's a question here about how do we avoid killing local businesses because of low tariffs and similar products from nearby countries. So I was wondering, even as Nigeria is trying to prepare for this, how are you looking to protect local businesses? Or what's your reaction to that question?
Thank you very much. So the two things. The reduction in tariff for us in ECOWAS will happen over a 10-year period. So it's not an on-off switch that will just turn off. That's number one.
Sure.
Secondly, like I mentioned, there's it's really about those products would only come in if they meet the rules of origin. don't forget that today we import almost everything from outside Africa. So really, what we are trying to push back, the people we are trying to push back on are people from outside Africa, right? So indeed, what the extra burden that you see for businesses, one is identifying new suppliers based in Africa, but also making satisfying the rules of origin, which also means, if you think about it, other people in Africa will also be looking for raw materials from Nigeria to be able to satisfy their own rules of origin requirements. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Another question here: can we get details of services and products in Nigeria that can be exported? What will be the best resource? And this is for anyone on the panel. Maybe Francis, you want to take a stab at that very quickly. What's the best resource if I wanted to get a sense of what is allowable, what is not, some guidance in terms of how I get involved?
Okay, so like I said earlier, the schedule of tariff concessions, which tells you what Nigeria would or ECOWAS would liberalize and all of that. Every country or most countries have developed it and submitted it to the AfCFTA Secretariat. It is undergoing technical verification. Once that is done, we are waiting for it. Once that is done, it will be made public. Just the same way you go to customs website and you will see the duties. There's an Excel spreadsheet on customs website that shows you the duties for your product. You will have something similar there, but it hasn't been published yet.
So eventually it will be the customs at the end of the day.
Published, and it will be in the public domain. Yes.
And I'm still staying with you, Francis, but I think this is a very important question, which I sort of thought would be useful for you to address for the benefit of others. And I am not avoiding our other speakers, but I think this is so important. When you were speaking, you spoke as though this agreement hasn't kicked off. But as I mentioned in my intro to this event, I mentioned that it took effect from January 1st. So can you just explain what that implies? What has happened?
Let's use your own banking terms, right? You give an offer or you do whatever, right? But then you have conditions precedent, right? You can't get a drawdown without satisfying the conditions precedent. But the loan of—
So what conditions are in play here?
Exactly. So the same thing. It has been authorized by the African heads of state for trade to start, which is a precondition for trade to start. But then for you to now go and now say, go and start, you need to know which products are liberalized by Nigeria, which products are liberalized by Egypt, which products are liberalized by South Africa. And that is the list that I'm talking about that we are waiting for to be published. So once that is published, then anybody can take advantage of it.
Okay, thanks for that, clarifying that. All right, so I want to go to some of the representatives of Coronation Merchant Bank now. So Chinwe was also supposed to speak to us about, the digital aspect of engaging right now under the African Common Free Trade Area. And I just wanted to hear the perspective of a bank in that respect. Perhaps you have some solutions that some of our attendees should need to be aware of as they prepare to engage on the African continent.
Well, so to talk about that, clearly we've mentioned previously that because of COVID, it's clear that digitization and it's relevant in the trade sector. Now at Coronation Merchant Bank, we've done quite a lot in that, or we are doing things around digitization. Currently, we have the product Coronation Trade Hub, and this hub look at the processes from start to finish, from the customer end of it, in terms of our CBM forms, in terms of our letters of credit, in terms of foreign exchange and bid allocations, in terms of looking at the shipping processes. And what does it do? It handles documentations and negotiation of processes around our trades. It looks at how you deal with your custom processes, how you deal with your custom duties, and it helps in terms of reporting from the start to the to the finish of it. And what is important about it is that it gives the customer the benefit to handle from start to finish. They can sit from the comfort of wherever they are, from their office, maybe they are doing a negotiation deal sometime somewhere with the supplier. They can start that process from the comfort of where they are, and will be able to get on to do all the CBM processes, all the custom processes, and be able to get onto the bank to do the financing, do the document handling, and be able to assess funding as well. So in terms of looking at the digital processes, that's something that we are doing present in Coronation as we speak.
Thank you for that. And at the end of this, we will be sharing contact information for all our attendees to engage the team at Coronation Merchant Bank. All right, we have another question here from an attendee all the way from Ogun State. And I'll just read. Africa has 4 main economic regions, including ECOWAS. The first question is, how much buy-in do we have from all the regions? How do we address the challenge of implementing a common continental economic trade policy, which is needed to make the free trade area a success? Komi, I thought perhaps you may want to speak to that point.
Yes, interesting question. I think this is one of the questions that always come during the discussion, with especially with the private sector, because you have the RECs, the regional economic communities. You have now the AfCFTA, and there might be some overlaps. There might be some convergence, also some conflictory objective here and there. But of course, the AfCFTA make it also clear that the RECs are building blocks of the AfCFTA agreement. And Francis alluded briefly also that, for example, some of the offers are done within the context of ECOWAS as one region. So there are already some specific initiatives that are taken at regional level to already maximize synergies. But of course, there are some other work that needs to be done, and they are ongoing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. I hope that answers the question. Demola, I'd like to come to you now. Maybe you can speak to trade finance, because at the end of the day, as the goods begin to move, we need money. And, you know, since you are playing in the financial services space, it would be great for you to educate our attendees as to what is possible, either dealing with you as Coronation Merchant Bank, or perhaps Coronation Merchant Bank is partnering with other finance providers. You know, give us a sense of what has been unleashed in terms of financing with this agreement.
Thank you very much. As you're aware, Coronation is a trade finance led bank, and our key business is trade finance. What we have set up over the last 5 years of operation is to be able to serve our client base across wherever their demand is needed. In terms of the fostering the AfCFTA, our view is through the bank and through our partnerships across Africa, we should be able to finance any form of trade within this region. You know, Nigeria is a key economic hub in the Africa region. What we believe is that the AfCFTA presents a very significant for Nigerian businesses to reach out across Africa. You're already beginning to see it as they begin to set up across ECOWAS and the East Africa region. We're moving more towards North Africa and South Africa, and I've used Coronation through our suite of trade finance products can finance this expansion.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. There was a question, I think, related to that. If we want to drive and fund an intra-Africa trade fair, who do we talk to? Interesting point. Anyway, you did mention the IATF. I'm sure there are a lot of lessons we can learn from that. And if you can, do your best to be there in Durban as early as November, actually. Okay, another question here. Does Coronation Merchant Bank provide advisory services for companies seeking to understand how to maximize the AfCFTA? If not, is advisory provided by other Coronation entities? And I think this question speaks to what I imagine is the concern of many people. It seems there are many moving parts here. You need to understand how it works. So Sienna, do you want to speak to this?
So yes, we do provide advisory services for our clients, and we can work with them on the AfCFTA. As you can see with the panelists that we brought on board, the bank's aim is to provide value add for all the clients that we have. We can work with them for their Africa expansion. We already have several clients we've already spoken to around this as they expand across Africa region.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Komi, I have a question for you. Implementation strategies was a point that I picked out of your presentation earlier. And I was wondering since we are very focused on Africa or Nigeria in this conversation right now, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts about what we can learn from the implementation strategies of other African nations. What have you observed with other African nations as we move into this agreement?
Thanks. Thanks. And I'm sure Francis will also tell the story of what is the plan, especially in Nigeria. But from other countries, what is very important is that they, of course, whether it comes to goods and services, they know they cannot embrace all the sectors. So they have decided to go with those specific sectors they are going to support, whether from government perspective or even the banking sector, to be able to unlock the potential in those services or goods. For example, we are working with Côte d'Ivoire that has identified few sectors and services as well. But of course, at national or regional level, there might be some priority services, sector or goods, but they have to be, streamlined or put them kind of, for example, Nigeria can decide to go with maybe 2 or 3 very specific sectors that will have the highest potential for the whole economy under the AfCFTA. So these are some of the issues that are being done on the ground, but there are still a lot of work, whether to sensitize all the stakeholders, whether from the private sector to understand the issue, or the bank to design specific product for the AfCFTA, toward the AfCFTA markets. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Francis, thank you so much. I see that you are already engaging some of our attendees and typing in responses to some of the questions. So, so maybe if I can just pick up another one for you. Would you say, if I'm taking this very seriously, that I need an advisor to really engage the African continent so I don't miss anything? Because it would be unfortunate if I make the investments with an expectation and then I begin to deal, so to speak, with the rest of the continent, and then I find out that I'm not competitive for one reason or the other. What would be your message to those who are taking this opportunity very seriously right now? How do they prepare?
Okay, thank you very much. So it is like export business is a different ballgame altogether. First of all, do you need an advisor? Yes, I would recommend that, because and you need advisor in terms of, let's say, even in the standards area. An issue that we are experiencing a lot is product rejection, and this is global rejection of our products, because our products have not met the requirements of the importing countries, and by the time they reject it, your money is gone, right? Mm-hmm. Now, beyond those standards, we talk about, even within the market space, you have understanding the market, understanding the preferences, right? The cultural norms, I mean, it's not like coming to Nigeria, like doing business in Nigeria. There are certain things that are peculiar to us. So you need to understand, follow who know road, not me talk up, right? So it is very important. But and you also now need to, as much as possible, just treat it as you would treat any important investment. You need your bank. Some of this information already would come from your bank, because your banks relate with so many people. They see all sorts of issues. You do all sorts of due diligence as well. So there are so many parties you need to relate with to make sure that you get the you can't get too much information, to be honest.
All right. Kasena, I saw you nodding. Do you want to say something about that as well?
Yes, I need to just add to it that what's really critical is you need expertise information. You need experts to direct you. And to a large extent, that's what we do here in Coronation. Demola just alluded to the fact that we're a trade finance focused bank. And I can assure you that coming to Coronation will give you that direction, that lead that is required even to drive your export business. Because the whole idea is to drive the export business. And we looked at the stats that Chinwe presented. It's clear that we're clearly more import driven. But for us to drive the export base, and you certainly need that level of skill and expertise to give you that direction you need.
Right, thank you so much. We appreciate the commitment. There is a question here, and I think it does cater to the SMEs. And I wanted to hear from whoever on the panel may want to speak to this point. How do you prepare SMEs to get involved in the African Common Free Trade area?
Okay, so at the National Action Committee, we have identified that we have small businesses, a lot of small businesses, and much smaller M&E companies, right? So, and our concern is that they may not be able to, or they may not be able to satisfy the rules of origin that you require to meet. So, one of the programs that we are pushing now is SME aggregation. So building ecosystem is very critical. So SME aggregation, produce and sell to the next higher level person that aggregates, and then we take on the documentation burden and all of that. So this is something that we are doing. The second thing that we are doing is we've also trying to get businesses online, e-commerce, getting them to use existing platforms. So the Jumias, the Kongas, and so on that already exist, but understanding the packaging and all the requirements that they need. These are something that we're working with these entities to see how we can onboard as many SMEs, right? We are also taking the AfCFTA message to the states. I mean, I was at CardInvest 6.0 last week, and it's about actually helping them, telling them that we need to build ecosystems, focus on one product and build ecosystems around them. And that is the way that you can then reduce the effort of doing business and then reduce the cost and again aggregate more and more of these. These are some of the things. There are a number of other things, but I mean I can go on and on, but just gives you a flavor of the kind of things that we're doing.
Sure, I think the aggregation point is very important. Thank you so much for
speaking. Can I add something to that?
Oh, great, Chiwe, I didn't realize that you were here. Okay, please, by all means.
Yeah, so let me just add that structure is very important for SMEs or SME owners, and I think the onus is on them to seek sensitization seminars. There's a prior project that I did work on with Kumi, and we realized that the SME owners were not well informed with the opportunities that they had with regards to AfCFTA and trade and the financial services sector as a whole. So first of all, structure, because if you're not well structured, you may not be able to gain access to some of the benefits that are out there for you. And then secondly, sensitization seminars, which I know banks are conducting, but SME owners seem to not be aware of these seminars.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. And for some reason, I couldn't see you. Perhaps maybe you are not turning on your camera, but at least now I know that you are here, and hopefully I can still throw a few questions your way. Komi, you mentioned lubricants earlier. That caught my interest, and obviously there are so many products, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts about how a country like Nigeria, for example, can begin to organize itself to play in that space. Because, as you know, we have a huge abundance of petrochemical resources in this country. What are your thoughts about how we can get involved there?
Yeah. So thanks. Yes, I think there was just before COVID, there was a big lubricant and oil meeting in Cape Town, where one or two of the key sessions discussed on the opportunities of the AfCFTA. Now, a country like Nigeria has the natural resources, as you mentioned, petrochemicals. Of course, there are other countries as well, Egypt, South Africa, that really want to push in those sectors. They have already developed skills that are needed, and because these are very technical areas. The AfCFTA provides opportunities for liberalize some of those sectors, so the opportunity is there. I think skills will be one of the key importance to see what are the requirements to be able to also penetrate African market and other markets. Partnership, I think, is also very important, not only at the banking sector level, like Demola mentioned, but also at the technical level. For example, South Africa can partner with, for example, some of the sectors players in Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, for example. They can have a partnership in place. Some of those countries in Eastern Africa that also have those petrochemicals can also be brought in the picture for regional. But I will insist on the skills to be able to really develop those sectors that are really technical. Thank you.
And we need to get organized for that. I have another question here about Nigeria's largest export to Africa, like the rest of the world, is crude oil. And while lowering tariff barriers may increase the attractiveness of some trade, I wonder what the biggest non-trade barriers are and what role infrastructure, both within origin countries and between countries, play in limited trade so far. I really feel this is the big elephant in the room, because at the end of the day, if the goods or service that you want to export to the rest of Africa cannot leave your country or cannot be received at the other country, then really trade cannot happen, no matter the good intentions you may have. So maybe, Kumi, you can speak to this more so from the UNECA perspective, how you see countries and markets reorganizing themselves for this.
Yes, non-tariff, usually barriers, are some of the key impediments to intra-African trades beyond even tariff barriers. Sometimes you find products, maybe trading, for example, onion among African countries, which will become more expensive than importing them, for example, from Holland, that also produce a lot of onion, those specific products. So non-tariff barrier is one of the key issues. Now, under the AfCFTA, I think there has been progress. For example, the AfCFTA Secretariat, the African Union, and the UN Conference on Trade and Development developed a mechanism, continental mechanism, to report and monitor non-tariff barrier-related issues, so that once you experience the challenge at the border, you can then quickly call non-tariff barriers focal points at the country level, what import or export country, to deal with the issues. And now we know that some of the issues, especially non-tariff, the rules of origins, compliance, technical or administrative compliance, and so are very important. Infrastructure is a huge issue, but then I think also the digitalizing trades facilities mechanism is very important. And I think Coronation Bank said they are working in those areas. So I think it's important to digitalize trade process within the continent, single windows and so. Sharing information online for market players, SMEs to get information online and so. These are some of the issues that are very important to mainstream or to streamline trade processes.
Right. And Francis, if I can pose the same question to you. If we take a look at Nigeria, the first thing people are going to say is, even our ports ready for this, our airports ready, our seaports ready. What are we doing to, in terms of policy action or activity that would catalyze intra-Africa trade from Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much. I think my answer to that is AfCFTA is a realization that we are at we're already in a problem in these areas. So these are some of the imperatives to drive the changes that we are looking for. We're not there. We need, the way I describe it is that if you compare our import road and our export road, our import is an express road, our export is a dirt road, right? So it's only when the more they trade, the more their attention, the more things get done. There's a lot that is going on in the area, in the ports and other places that we need to sustain. So and we cannot wait and say, let's fix the ports before we now go and then start trading externally, because guess what? The trade opportunities will be gone by then. So the problems are the problems, but in the life of a free trade agreement, those problems are really short term. We may not solve all of them in the next 5 years, but they are short term in the life of a free trade agreement. And like I also said, there are companies are already export volume is growing, the value is growing, non-oil, and the more they grow, the more some of these problems will fall away. You mentioned something. I'm not trying to belittle in any case the infrastructure problem that we are facing, but these are already these are recognized and being resolved. You also talked about petroleum, for instance, and indeed, if you look at petroleum, so refined petroleum, that is Africa's top import. So and this is our bread and butter. So really, South Africa, for instance, takes, I think, is about 30% or more of the market share, and they buy crude oil from us anyway. So our refineries, the Dangote refinery, when it comes on stream, and other refineries will start to change. We'll now start to see changes in those areas. But the opportunities across sectors are huge: oil and gas, oil, and so on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Demola, maybe you can take a stab at this point, because as we know, there has been volatility in the currency, and there's a question here about the impact of the falling Naira, or the weakening of the Naira in terms of its exchange rate. Do you feel Nigerian goods will still be competitive? I would think under normal circumstances, a weaker currency should actually support exports, but you tell me.
You've actually hit the nail on the head. Weaker currencies do encourage exports, because the expectation is that the foreign exchange coming in will have higher value. If you look at how China has pushed their export side of their trade balance of trade payments, which is why America is always accusing them of manipulating currency. What they're doing is they're pricing, their exchange rates are slightly lower so that they will foster export volumes out of the markets. So it's expected that if Nigeria continues along this path that we're on to grow out the export side of our business, especially the non-oil exports, a weaker currency should help.
Right.
So you have more flows coming into the country.
Okay. So in a way, that's a good thing, in quotes, given all the pressure that we've been hearing about the currency. Okay. Go ahead. You want to say something?
Yes. What I want to say is that as much as possible, I think the agreement we tend to create a scenario where Africans can trade among themselves and in their currencies as much as possible. Where your dependence of the dependence on US dollars will be minimized to as much as possible, bring it down to a very minimal level. And I think the central banks of the various countries, they are working on something, working on platforms that can have a situation where I'm going to be exporting in Naira, and say there's an importer in Kenya is going to be, importing in its currency as well. And you now have a platform whereby the central banks, through an existing platforms, will be able to do your interchange of trades, and to a large extent you minimize your dependence on the dollar, and at the same time you keep your currency running, and it improves the agreement, the essence of the agreement as well. So that's something that I know that the agreement is going to bring to fore.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'll take one more question. But to that point, I do believe that even the Afreximbank is working on a platform that's going to enable that. And even beyond that, Nigerian fintechs, we'll work it out. We'll make something happen, I'm sure, that would allow that to happen. So I think I have less concerns about being able to pay or receive payments. Okay, last question I think we can take as we begin to round things up is, does the agreement put into consideration the duty rate for all 54 countries that have signed up? So I imagine that the agreement pretty much eliminates duties, but do you want to speak to that, Francis?
Yeah, so I talked about the liberalization of 90% of tariff lines. So every country will look at their trade and decide the 90% they are going to liberalize. So liberalize means zero duty. Now, but it doesn't. I mentioned that the schedule is being reviewed because it's not just choose any 90% of tariffs and then liberalize, because you can then choose the ones that are not trading in. So the technical verification that I talked about is verifying to make sure that you are liberalizing things that will make sense for others, areas where you are actually importing products. So the answer is yes, it considers all of them, and there are guidelines and rules around what would be in that 90% to make sure that it makes sense.
Thank you very much. And I think we really have to round it up here. So on that note, say thank you so much to all our speakers and panelists. I think it's been good. As we begin to wrap things up, I just want to perhaps appeal to the others. You can now switch off your videos while I call on Demola Adekoya to make some brief closing comments.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Wale, and the speakers, Mr. Anatoku and Mr. Sowu. It was indeed a very enlightening session. I'm sure all the attendees enjoyed it as much as I did. We would like to thank everyone for signing on. I know it's very difficult on a Monday afternoon to sign on to such a program. We want to thank you very much for signing on, and I hope again that you learned quite a lot. As we sign out today, we want to assure you that for all our clients on this call, Coronation is your partner, and we are very willing to work with you as you look to expand across Africa. The opportunities presented by the AfCFTA are enormous, and we think and believe strongly that this is a good thing for the region, especially Nigeria, as you look to do business outside your existing operations. Once again, thank you very much for signing on, and we look forward to seeing you at new seminars going throughout the year and beyond. Thank you.
Just a few announcements before we wrap things up. Once again, I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, find the link to the survey in the Q&A field. Please do your best to complete the survey, and as I mentioned, the sweetener is that you would receive a link where you can get a recording of this whole event. And right after this, there will be an interactive session with members of the press. I do know that those who are involved have already received links to that session, so please do your best. We're going to transit almost immediately to that right after this. And as I mentioned, as we begin to close things out, a short video will be playing, and you would be able to view the contact information if you would like to contact the Coronation Merchant Bank team. So thank you so much again for being part of it. We are getting there, but as you continue to investigate, interrogate this massive trade opportunity on the African continent, I want to believe that you're going to make the most of it and participate when you can. Thank you so much again. My name is Wale Famrewa. It's been a delight to moderate this session, and we look forward to having you at the next event.
We have now come to the end of the Coronation Interactive session. We trust that it was an insightful and rewarding experience for you. To get the recording of this event sent to you, kindly take the survey posted in the comment section. For further inquiries of our Coronation products and services, please call Coronation Resolution Center, our interactive call center service on 01-279-7640. You can also send an email to crc@coronationmb.com. Thank you once again, and see you at the next edition of the Coronation Interactive session.